The morning sun spilled softly across the quiet park, turning the dew on the grass into tiny shimmering diamonds. Birds sang like a live orchestra above, and yet, the bench near the old oak tree seemed untouched by the day's warmth. There sat an elderly man named Thomas, wrapped in his tattered brown coat, hands trembling around a paper cup of lukewarm coffee. To everyone else, he was invisible, a ghost drifting through the routine of city life. He wasn't always this way. Once, he had a home full of laughter, a wife who baked cinnamon rolls on Sundays, and a little girl whose giggles could melt any bad day. But time and tragedy had a way of stripping people down, layer by layer. Now, Thomas had nothing but memories in a faded photo tucked inside his coat pocket, a reminder of everything he'd lost. That morning was like any other. People walked past, eyes glued to their phones, heads down, unaware of the quiet man watching life go by. But fate had a small surprise in store, a spark of kindness wrapped in something ordinary. Her name was Lily, barely 22, with messy hair, a bright yellow scarf, and a tote bag full of sketchbooks. She wasn't rich, but her heart was full, overflowing, in fact. As she hurried through the park toward her part-time cafe job, she noticed the man on the bench. Something about his lonely figure tugged at her chest. Maybe it was the way his hands shook. Maybe it was how he smiled faintly at the pigeons, as if pretending he was feeding them from an invisible bag. Without thinking, she paused. "Sir," she said softly, "would you like a sandwich? I made an extra this morning." Thomas blinked, unsure if he'd heard her correctly. "For me?" he asked, voice raspy from disuse. She nodded, holding out a wrapped sandwich. "Turkey and cheese. I was in a rush but I promise it's decent." He hesitated. "You don't have to, miss. I'll be fine." Lily smiled, a smile that reached her eyes. "I know I don't have to. I want to." Something broke inside him then, not in pain, but in gratitude. He took the sandwich with trembling hands, whispering a quiet, "Thank you." Lily waved, already backing away, late for work but lighter somehow, as if she'd just made the world a little softer. That tiny act of kindness became the first ripple in a quiet storm of goodness. The next morning, Lily returned. She brought coffee this time, hot and steaming. Thomas tried to refuse again, but she simply placed it beside him and said, "Then just hold it for me until I come back." They began talking, slowly, like strangers learning to speak a shared language. She learned he had once been a carpenter. That he built the wooden swings still standing near the lake. That his daughter used to call him, Papa Bear. He learned she wanted to be an illustrator, but didn't believe her work was good enough to show the world. Their conversations became a morning ritual, one he began to live for. Sometimes she'd show him her sketches, and he'd grin like a proud grandfather. Sometimes he'd tell her stories from the old days, and she'd laugh so hard she'd nearly spill her coffee. Other times, they simply sat in silence, watching the sunrise. But Lily's kindness didn't stop with Thomas. Her quiet generosity began to ripple outward. One rainy afternoon, while running to catch a bus, she saw a stray dog shivering under a bench. She couldn't leave it there. She wrapped it in her coat, took it home, named it Lucky, and posted its photo online to find its owner. When no one came forward, she kept it, because, as she said later, no one should ever feel unwanted. The cafe she worked in started noticing her spirit. Customers left smiling after she served them, even on their worst days. One regular, a tired nurse named Amelia, once told her, you remind me the world still has good people." Kindness, it seemed, was contagious. A week later, Amelia left an envelope on the counter addressed to the girl with the yellow scarf. Inside was a note, "Thank you for making my mornings brighter. Here's something for you to keep spreading light." It contained $100. Lily cried, not because of the money, but because someone had seen her heart. When she met Thomas again, she told him about it. He listened quietly, eyes glistening. "The world always gives back, Lily," he said softly. "Maybe not right away, but it remembers." She smiled. "Then I hope it remembers you, too." He chuckled, though it sounded more like a sigh. "Maybe it already has, through you." That night, as Lily walked home under a sky scattered with stars, she realized how simple it was, how effortless kindness could be. Just noticing someone, listening, sharing a small piece of warmth, it could change everything. She began sketching that night, drawing scenes of everyday kindness. A man helping an old woman cross the street. A child giving his umbrella to a stranger. A girl handing a sandwich to a lonely man on a park bench. Each drawing was filled with color and light, as if the paper itself was glowing. Her art slowly made its way online, shared by friends and strangers alike. People began commenting, "This made me cry. I needed this today. Your drawings remind me there's still hope." And quietly, behind every post, Thomas smiled. Because though the world had once forgotten him, it now remembered again, through the kindness of a young woman with a yellow scarf, whose small gesture lit 1,000 hearts. He started carving again, a small wooden bird, wings open mid-flight. When he handed it to her one morning, he said, "For your desk." A reminder that kindness always soars. She kept it by her window. Every time she looked at it, she felt his words echo in her heart. Neither of them knew that something far bigger was yet to come, something that would turn their quiet friendship into a story that would touch thousands. But for now, in that moment, under the gentle warmth of the morning sun, it was enough. Kindness had found its way home. Winter arrived quietly that year, with breath made visible in mornings wrapped in silver mist. The park where Thomas and Lily first met was now blanketed in soft frost. The wooden benches were cold, the trees bare, and yet, in one corner, a single spot still felt alive, the one where they always met. But one morning, when Lily arrived with 2 steaming cups of coffee, the bench was empty. She frowned, looked around, then waited, telling herself he was just running late. Half an hour passed, then an hour. By noon, she was still sitting there, her coffee growing cold. A strange ache bloomed inside her chest, one she couldn't name. The next day, she came again. Still no Thomas. By the 3rd day, she began asking around, the park cleaner, the lady who sold pretzels, even the street musician nearby. No one had seen him. One man said he thought Thomas had fallen ill last week. Another mentioned he might have been taken to the shelter clinic downtown. Lily ran there immediately, heart racing with fear and hope. The nurse at the front desk looked up as she arrived, breathless and red-eyed. "Excuse me," Lily said, clutching her yellow scarf tightly. An elderly man, maybe 70, thin, gray hair, kind eyes. "His name is Thomas." The nurse nodded softly. "He's here, dear. He's been under observation for a few days. Poor man caught pneumonia, but he's stable now." Relief and tears came at once. She thanked the nurse and hurried down the hall until she reached room 12. There he was, frail, pale, but alive. His eyes fluttered open as she entered, and a faint smile curved his lips. "Lily, you found me." She laughed and cried all at once. "Of course I did. Who else is going to complain about my bad coffee?" He chuckled weakly. "I missed your voice, girl. I thought maybe the world had gone quiet without it." She pulled a chair close and took his hand. "Don't you ever scare me like that again." Over the next few weeks, she visited him every day. She brought him soup, her drawings, and stories about her cafe customers. The nurses began to know her by name, the girl with the yellow scarf. One afternoon, Thomas reached for something under his blanket. "I made this for you," he said, handing her a small wooden box. It was beautifully carved, with tiny wings etched across the lid. Inside was a folded note and a pendant, a little wooden heart. The note read, "Greater than, for the girl who reminded an old man that kindness still lives in the world. Keep spreading light. Your friend, Thomas." Her tears fell before she could stop them. "You didn't have to. I wanted to," he interrupted, smiling. "You gave me something I thought I'd lost forever, purpose." After a long pause, he said quietly, "Promise me you'll show your art to the world." "I will," she whispered. "I promise." But a few days later, Thomas's condition worsened. Pneumonia spread, and his frail body began to fade. The doctors did everything they could, but some goodbyes come softly, without warning. When Lily arrived that morning, the nurse met her outside the room. One look was enough. Her world seemed to stop. The halls blurred. The coffee in her hand fell, splattering across the white tiles. Thomas was gone. On the table beside his bed was one last carving, unfinished, but beautiful, a small wooden bridge. Underneath it, written in shaky letters, "Keep walking." Lily held it to her chest and sobbed until her voice broke. That night, the city lights blurred behind her tears as she walked home. The wind was cold, but she could almost hear him, his laugh, his warmth, his words. The world always remembers kindness. She didn't sleep. Instead, she sat by her desk, surrounded by her sketches, and began drawing again. Not out of routine, but out of love. She drew Thomas, the park bench, his smile, the wooden bird he gave her. Then she drew the bridge, the one he'd carved before he passed. She titled it, "Keep Walking." It became the most heartfelt piece she'd ever made. A week later, she shared it online with a caption, "Greater than, this is for Thomas, the man who taught me that even the smallest act of kindness can light the darkest days." What happened next felt like magic. People from all over began sharing her post. Comments poured in, strangers telling their own stories of kindness, love, loss, and hope. One woman wrote, "I visited my elderly neighbor today because of this." Another said, "Your story made me call my father after years." News outlets picked it up. Her artwork went viral. She was invited to display her drawings at a local gallery, her first exhibition. The title of her show, Kindness Vibes. The day of the exhibit, the gallery was filled with people, families, students, old men with canes, young children holding their parents' hands. Each painting told a story: a girl feeding a stray, a nurse comforting a patient, a stranger paying for someone's meal, and in the center, the park bench, the yellow scarf, and the wooden bird. Beneath that painting was a small wooden heart, the one Thomas had carved for her. Visitors stood silently in front of it, moved beyond words. Many cried, some smiled through tears. A journalist approached her later and asked, "What inspired all this?" Lily smiled softly. "An old man on a park bench. He gave me a sandwich's worth of wisdom, that kindness doesn't need money or fame. It just needs courage to see people." The story spread. Her art became part of a national campaign promoting compassion. Schools began using her illustrations to teach empathy to children. People started sharing their kindness vibes, moments, acts of goodness inspired by Thomas and Lily. Months later, on a bright spring morning, Lily returned to the park. The snow had melted, the grass was green again, and the same bench waited under the old oak tree. But this time, there was something new, a small brass plaque fixed to the bench. It read, "Greater than in memory of Thomas. Kindness is the bridge that keeps us human." Lily sat down, her scarf fluttering in the breeze. She took out a cup of coffee and placed it beside her, just like she used to. "Morning, Thomas," she whispered. "We did it." A pigeon landed nearby, pecking at the crumbs of the sandwich she'd brought. She laughed softly, feeling him there in the quiet, in the sunlight, in the warmth, in the way the world seemed a little gentler now. Because that's what kindness does, it doesn't vanish. It echoes. Through every stranger's smile, every shared meal, every soft word that reminds someone they're seen, Thomas lived on. And so did Lily, the girl with the yellow scarf, the artist who turned grief into grace, and one man's forgotten story into a legacy that touched hearts across the world. And as she walked away from the bench that day, she thought she heard his voice one last time, gentle, amused, filled with pride. "Keep walking, kid, the world still needs your light." So she did, and everywhere she went, kindness followed. Kindness doesn't need wealth, fame, or grand gestures, it begins with you. A smile to a stranger, a meal for someone in need, a few minutes to listen, every act ripples farther than you'll ever know. Today, be someone's reason to believe in goodness. Share a little kindness, hold a door, make a call, forgive someone, or simply say, "I'm here." Post your story or act of kindness with the hashtag #KindnessVibes and inspire others to do the same. Because together, we can make the world softer, one heart at a time.